Hey everybody, Brendan Dell here, and welcome to the Daily Creative. Today's guest on the show is April Dunford. April is a positioning expert and an author. And what I'm really excited for you to hear from her is how she's evolved her practice into essentially becoming a market of one. So this is a concept I'm going to be talking more and more about as we go along. But the way I see the modern marketplace is that you're either one of two things. You're either another one of those, or you're the only one like you. And what all of us want is to be in a business that's free of commoditization. And you'll see this in software, you'll see this in services, you'll see this in all spaces where people don't search for you, don't search for what you do, they search for you, right? They search for who you are. And April has made this transition. Her book on positioning is considered an authority on this subject. She's booked. We're sitting here in March of 2021. When we're recording this, she's booked through September with folks. She works with early stage technology startups. They're willing to wait nearly 6 months to work with her because of how she's positioned herself. There's a lot of learnings in this episode, a lot of things that I was excited to learn from her. And I hope you enjoyed as well. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation with April Dunford. Welcome to the show, April.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited for this conversation. So to kick things off, tell us your story a little bit. How'd you get started in consulting?
So I spent 25 years of my career being a repeat vice president of marketing at a series of startups. I think I did 7 of them. And the reason there's so many is because they kept getting acquired. So I think 6 of those got acquired. And so through acquisition, I did a tour of duty at, I think, 5 big companies where I was an executive in there. And so, the repeating pattern of my career was I'd land at a company as the head of marketing, grow marketing. If we're doing our job right, the revenue's going like this. We'd get acquired. I'd get stuck at the big company for a couple of years. And when I got bored of that, I would pop out and I would go do the next one. So after my last one, I decided I needed a change of scenery. And so I decided to do consulting. And I've been doing that ever since. It's been, 4 or 5 years since I've been a proper consultant.
What did you want out of consulting that you weren't getting at, the startup game or the big company game?
Yeah, you know what? I kind of had this thing where I felt like I'd kind of done the vice president of marketing thing. Like I'd done it 6 or 7 times. And I kind of felt like, you know what, I've done this bit. Like there's got to be something else I get to do in my career. Because, there kind of wasn't another obvious job for me inside the company. And I'd been a COO before and I was a CEO for a little bit. But I really like marketing. Like I'm really still interested in marketing. So I thought I want to do that, but I'm done with this role. And so I had this, I took a few weeks off and I had one of these, let's sit around and think about my life sort of moments. And when I started consulting, I drew this little Venn diagram actually in my notebook. And it was like, I want to do really good, really impactful work. So I want to just do the stuff that I'm awesome at. And so as a vice president of marketing, you do a lot of things and I'm not awesome at all the things, but I'm awesome at some of the things. So, I drew the circle. I want to do work I'm really good at and because that's going to make me happy. So I'm going to do that. And then I also drew a circle that was like, I want to be able to be picky about who I work with. And I just want to do work with good people, like people that I feel like that kind of get me and I like them. So, across my 7 startups, not everybody was awesome there. And so I thought, you know what, I want to be able to be picky and say, good work, good people. And so I want that intersection. And then the last thing was cash. It was like, I want good work, good people, fair money. Mm-hmm. And in my career as working as an executive in startups, sometimes I made fair money and sometimes I didn't. And that bugged me towards the end. I was like, sometimes what I made was terrible money on a promise that my options or stock or something would be worth a lot of money at some point, and that rarely happens. And so I felt like I wasn't always getting paid what I was worth. And so I drew these intersecting circles And then I made a list of things that I didn't like. And that was sort of, what do I want? I want that thing right in the middle. And then I made a list of things I didn't like so much. And so I had spent, 20 out of my 25-year career managing teams. And I was like, I'm tired of managing teams. And I think I don't want to manage a team anymore. So I want to be a bit more in control of, you know what, if I want to take August off, I'm going to take August off, and all hell doesn't break loose for my whole team if I decide to do that. So I wanted the flexibility that comes with not having a team to be responsible for. So that's kind of how I set it up at the beginning. It had to meet all these requirements, which actually is how I ended up focusing on positioning, because it gave me a way to do all those things. Like, I was really good at positioning. It's a thing that companies really needed, and a lot of companies really needed, so I could be picky about my work. It's high value if you get it right. So if you're good at it, you can charge fair money for that. And it's a thing that I could do on my own without necessarily having a big team of folks to do. So it met that requirement too.
When you first started consulting, did you start out right away specializing in positioning, or did you start more general?
No, it took me a long time to figure this out. So, I first dipped a toe in consulting maybe 4 or 5 years previous to this consulting business, when, I had come out of a company and I was looking for a new job, and I interviewed with a bunch of companies, and I kind of couldn't make up my mind between 2 or 3 of them. And so I decided, you know what, I'm just going to consult for all 3, and I'll do part-time at all 3, and then I'll figure out which one I like the best. So I did a lot of consulting that wasn't consulting at all. It was basically like a long job interview where, I did a little bit of work for these 3. That was my first kick at, I told people I was consulting, but I was not consulting.
Yeah.
And then, so I ended up joining one of those companies, and I worked there, and then we got acquired, whatever. After I popped out of that one, I took another stab at it. And in that one, I was messing around a bit more with, if I'm going to do consulting, I should have an offering. Like, in my opinion, consulting is not the same thing as freelancing, where it's just, I'm like an employee, but I'm part-time.
So define those two. How do you think about those two things?
I think of them as entirely different. So I think if you're a freelancer, you're doing the same thing an employee would do. You're just doing it by the hour instead of, or part-time, or you say, I'm going to give you this much time, but you don't need a full-time me. I'm going to give you a part-time me. Yep. Whereas consulting, I feel like you're an expert at something. There is a project and there is a deliverable. And so there is a very set beginning, middle, and end of this project. We come in, we deliver this thing, and then we're done. And then, we both part ways. Whereas freelancing, maybe you work there forever part-time, or, and it's just, you keep paying me for hours, I keep showing up. And so I wanted to do consulting where there was a beginning and an end, and, we're going to get this thing done. And when I'm done, I'm out and you go on. And because I didn't want to be an employee anymore. So that included being a part-time employee.
Yeah. Don't want to join and become a part of their problems. You want to set this.
Well, it's hard for the stuff that I did. Like, if you come in and say, I'm going to be your part-time vice president of marketing, like, that never goes good. Like, I'm just going to tell you, like, I know people that do it and I'm amazed at them. Like, they must know something I don't know. But for me, that never went good. Like, I would come in and say, yeah, you're kind of small. You don't really need a full-time VP marketing. I'll be your part-time VP marketing. And what would end up is they want full-time VP marketing results. Yeah. Like, it's not like the expectations of what you could deliver went down. It was the same. So the expectation of what you can deliver is the same, but your pay gets cut by a third. And I was like, this kind of sucks. It's like all the responsibility with it. And then I'm going to have 3 of them at the same time that are all like, oh, our business is doomed if you mess this up. So anyway, that worked for me. That just seemed like having 3 jobs at once. And that, for me, that would.
And I think this is a common path. What you're describing is that people have a job, they come out with a certain amount of expertise, and they think, I want to be self-employed, right? I want to not have a boss. And they end up with 3 or 5 or 10 different bosses instead. And
exactly. And they're not really running their own business. Again, they're just freelancing, but not that there's anything wrong with freelancing. Like I think freelancing is awesome. But for me, that wasn't what I was trying to do. I was like, I want to have a thing where I come in, we tackle a problem. Once we've tackled that problem, I'm out. If I want to go be an employee, I just get a job being an employee.
Well, in my opinion, with freelancing too, is it's a great place to begin this path. But over time, everyone should be looking to develop expertise, package that expertise, and scale that expertise in some way. Otherwise, you're only going to ever earn whatever the hours that you can put into the day.
Well, that's kind of it too, because if you're doing that, then the comparable is full-time employee.
Yep.
Right. So people will say, well, you're just like full-time employee, only you work a third of the hours. Therefore, I pay you a third of that. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't seem like a good way to run a consulting business. Whereas if what I'm doing is we're working on a project and that project has components that happen when I'm face to face with you and components that happen when I'm not face to face with you. And I'm coming with some very specific expertise that, to be honest, you can't hire for that. Mm-hmm. And in fact, there is value in having an outside person come in and work with you on this thing that you wouldn't get from an employee, because an employee is just fundamentally different, has a fundamentally different perspective on this than an outside expert would. Mm-hmm. And that's where you make, in my opinion, where your rates can get quite high, because what you're doing is very specialized. And part of what they're paying for is the fact that you are outside eyes on this thing and outside expertise on this thing. And this just, it doesn't get compared to, like, you're not measuring it in hours anymore at all. It is in no way comparable to, we could just hire a person to go do that. It's like, no, you can't actually.
And I think it's such an important point. And I think from the financial side too, if you're dealing with executives who know how to read financials, which folks should, right? There's a difference between capital expenditures and operating expenditures, and they're going to think of them differently. And so they're going to look and say, okay, does it make sense to put a one-time cost into something to set us on the right track versus an employee? It's a completely different, it's a completely different set of liabilities too, from a hiring, from a variety of perspectives. So I think there's this huge value for people to learning how to do what you're doing, which is to move up the hierarchy, so to speak. So
the other thing too is you can talk about, impact, right? And you can start setting your pricing around impact. Like, what's it worth to you to solve this thing? Like, you can solve it maybe now with your company on your own, and it would take this many people at your company working across this much time to deliver a thing that maybe it's good and maybe it's not. I don't know. You weren't doing it with an expert. So, maybe it's the first time your team's ever done that versus, I'm going to come in and what I can guarantee you is a really good result, because I'm not going to take you on as a client if I can't guarantee you a good result. So I can guarantee you a good result, and I can tell you exactly the time frame we're going to take to do it. Like, that's worth something. That's a really different value prop than saying, by the hour you get X number of hours, and I'm going to do some stuff, and maybe it's good, maybe it's not. But we're not talking about deliverables.
So I want to come back to this piece, because I think you're on to something really important here as well. But before we get there, why positioning? How did you, VP marketing, there's all the universe of things that person is in charge of. Positioning too it's usually it's not one off, but it's a singular event often, right? Or it happens at very particular stages in a product life cycle. It happens sort of after a little traction.
Yeah, you're not doing it every day. Yeah.
No. So why that versus whatever else people might choose to specialize in? How did you arrive at that for yourself?
Yeah, so it was a combination of things. So the first thing was I thought I was good at it. So, and I had done it a bunch, and it was one of the weird things about my career, like just by accident, I had done a ton of positioning. So my first job in marketing at a startup, the first thing we did was reposition a product, and it, by luck, like not by good management, it worked out awesome. And so we had this product that was terrible. We repositioned. It was amazing. We got acquired. We all made all kinds of money. Yeah. And so that's what first sparked my interest in positioning, because I was like, holy cow, this positioning thing really changed our fortunes on this product. Mm-hmm. And when I landed at the acquired acquiring company. And then I got put in charge of a handful of other products. And a lot of those had bad positioning. And so we repositioned those as well. And then when I left that big company, I went to another startup. And the first thing we ended up doing in there was another repositioning again. And then that company got acquired. Then I landed the acquiring company. We repositioned a couple more that were underneath me. And then, and so by the time I get to the end of this 25 years, I've repositioned 16 products, which is a lot, right? Most of the time, if you spent the bulk of your career at one company, you might have done a positioning exercise once, maybe twice in 25 years. And I've done it 16 times. So that was the first thing, is I thought I was pretty good at it. Second thing was, I had kind of a methodology for doing it because I had done it so much. Like after the fifth or sixth one, I was like, okay, we have a process to do it. And towards the end of my career as vice president of marketing, that's actually why you hired me. Like you would hire me over someone else because I would come in and say, hey, I know how to do this positioning thing. And I could articulate the methodology I was going to use to do it, which, as far as I could tell, other people didn't have that. So I thought, okay, I've got a bit of intellectual property here around this positioning process or methodology. I've done it a bunch. So I feel like I'm confident I'm fairly good at it. And then the last thing was, I often wished I had an outside person to help facilitate this process when I was internal as a VP marketing. And I had caught myself thinking that before, like, you know what, this would be really great if I could bring someone in from the outside and then I could participate in this activity as the vice president of marketing and not in this dual role as the vice president of marketing and also the person who's trying to drive this positioning exercise. And so that's where I landed on, I could be that person. I could be that person that I wish that I had that comes in with deep expertise in positioning, knows how a company like this works, and then comes with a methodology and can help guide us through the methodology to get us where we need to go. So that's how I decided that positioning was going to be my thing, was that factor of things. Like,
did you do any validating to say the market needs this, accepts this, wants this, will pay for it? Or did you, was there anything?
Well, yeah, like at the beginning, I thought, oh, this will work because I wished I had that. And so I had this idea that I would sell this thing to vice presidents of marketing who were like me, and that's how it would go. And so then I went and talked to a bunch of vice presidents of marketing, and it became clear that there probably isn't the person I'm going to sell to. And so if the company was small, the vice president of marketing was generally kind of new. And the vice president of marketing was a little worried about bringing me in because sometimes the CEO was looking at them and saying, you fix this. I'm not hiring some consultant. That's what I hired you to do. So that was a bit of a problem. And so after I had this first bunches of conversations, I thought, you know what, maybe this is easier to sell to the CEO of a startup that doesn't quite have a vice president of marketing yet, like maybe needs one, but hasn't hired one yet. And this could be, big value for them. So then I tried that. So then I went and had some conversations with CEOs that didn't have the vice president of marketing that looked like the people that would have hired me in my former life. And that worked really well. So I did that for a bit. But then it evolved after that. Like, after I got doing it a bit, then I sort of started making a name for myself, and the CEOs talking to CEOs like, hey, bring April in. She's really good at this. And then at the same time, my rates were going up because I was getting busy. So anytime I was too busy, I'd put the rates up. And then I did start getting pulled in by vice presidents of marketing or somebody running product as well as CEOs, but at bigger companies that had been wrestling with this stuff for a little bit of time and were mature enough that they could see the value of bringing somebody in from the outside, which is a bit more like where I'm at now.
Do you think that you're selling an emotional solution for people, an emotional resolution that we are confused? I'm not sure where to point us. And will you come in and give us some clarity, or are you selling a rational solution to a problem that's like, we think this is going to increment revenue, or this is, right? Everybody wants to sell more stuff. It is
definitely both. So it has two components to it. So generally, the companies that come to me, it's either the CEO. Most often, it's the founder or the CEO, but lately I'm getting a lot more calls from vice presidents of marketing. And so they're coming, if the CEO comes to me, the CEO is like, I know we're leaving money on the table in sales. I know we could sell more if our story was crisper. And so I need to get that money. So there is definitely this money thing. But the other thing, so that's the ROI of it, right? We get a crisper story. We're going to get better leads coming in, more leads getting closed. The whole thing's going to work better. So there's, the main reason I get hired is this is costing us money, and we could be making way more revenue if we had this clean. The second thing, though, and maybe this is a bit more emotional thing, is I'm selling the ability to get agreement and alignment across the team. And that actually is wasting a lot of money in the company, but it's just harder to measure. But this idea that, and often I'll hear this from either the head of marketing or the CEO comes in and says, look, like, I know what the story should be. I know the story that works. If I'm sitting across from a customer, I can pitch it. But I sit in on 3 different sales meetings. I hear 3 different stories. If I go to my head of product tells the story a little bit different. If I look at our marketing material, the story's a little bit different. If I hear what's going on in customer success when they're trying to cross-sell and upsell a customer, story's a little bit different. And so I need outside help to get agreement and alignment across the team because, we're all big personalities here. And, we all got a point of view on this and we all think we're right. And so we've tried to do it internally, but it ends up being a bit of a fight. And a good CEO will come in and say, look, I don't want to just come in and tell the team what to do. Yep. I need the team to all get together. We need to hash it out and come to the conclusion together. This is what we're aligned on. And so that I'm bringing that too. So this is my job as a facilitator is I've got a methodology. I come in as the person who's going to help you get there, but I'm outside. I don't have a political stake in this game. And I can ask the questions that people on the team can't. Like I can say, gosh, your VP sales, it seems like you're saying this, but you founder, you're saying this, and these are really different things, man. Whereas the head of marketing might be scared to call that out because she might get fired if she does. Whereas I'm okay. You hired me to do this.
So when you made the transition early on in your practice from VP to facilitator, let's call you now, right? I'm assuming at the beginning people would come to you and say,
guide. Yeah.
What's that?
I'm the guide.
Yeah, the guide. At the beginning, I would assume people came to you and said, yeah, we need positioning, but we also need some of this and some of that.
Oh, yeah.
That too. How did you start to put guardrails around how you work with people? And then what was it like for you to start telling people no? Because I would assume there was a transition point at which
so much
you had to be willing to start walking away from work potentially, right? Because they wanted to sort of help me here and there and also do this thing, right?
Yeah. So one of the things I learned really early on is, I'm doing this positioning thing. What people often want is they don't even know what positioning is. What they want is a better sales pitch. What they want is better messaging on the homepage. Mm-hmm. But we can't do that until we get straight on the positioning. So that's why we're doing the positioning, right? We're going to do that first, and that's going to translate to messaging and a sales pitch and whatever. So they would often say, well, why don't you just write the messaging for me too? Like, you've been in here facilitating this thing. Why don't you write the messaging? And I'm like, because I'm not your VP marketing. You got a perfectly good VP marketing and a whole team of marketing people. They should be writing it. Why should I own that instead of you? And there was also this misconception, and this took a while for me to get my head around this too, is like, you know what? I'm not doing your positioning for you. That's not what this engagement is about, right? I'm facilitating a methodology and a process, and I'm helping the whole team get to the positioning that you need to get to.
Was that hard for you as
a little bit, right? Because you're used to being the person that does stuff.
Well, and even so, I would assume that you're somewhat type A, right? And that you've been a VP marketing. Let's just say you go after things.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people have this pleasing, desire, right? You want to do a good job. You want to make sure your fees are worth it or whatever. Was it difficult for you at some point to make that transition in your head that, wait, I'm actually more valuable facilitating this process than I am
just doing it on the own. Like one of the big things that I concluded after doing a bunch of these is I could do it for them. And in fact, I could do it for them faster, maybe better, but it won't stick. They won't own it. And most bad positioning comes from, again, this misalignment of the team, and they're misaligned because they haven't had a chance to fight it out and then come to an agreement and own it. And if I do it for them, they won't own it. So they got to own it. They got to own it after I'm gone. So they better own creating it as well. So I'm much better to come in and say, look, here's the process. Here's how we're going to do it. And I'm here to hold your hand and put the guardrails up and move you along this process. But I'm not doing it for you. It's your positioning. It's not my positioning. It's your positioning. And then everybody's way more invested in participating in the exercise because they know it's their thing. They got to live with it. Marketing's there. They're going to have to live with it. Sales is there. And I'm like, look, if you don't agree, heads up now, because next week you got to go out and sell this. And if you don't think you can sell it, then let's hear it.
I think there's so much value too that people miss in that taking a step back and saying, I'm here to facilitate this process, but this is yours. I'm going to leave and you guys need to do, that you need to believe this.
Right. Yeah. And you know what? It can't be mine. Like I am not an expert in your business. I don't eat, sleep, breathe, and drink this market all day, every day. It would be crazy. In fact, you would be nuts to hire someone outside of your company to do your positioning. That is actually crazy talk. No one should hire someone to do that because that person would take months to know anything close to what the employees inside your building know about how customers behave, what they like and what they don't like, what works and doesn't work in a sales situation, what works and doesn't work in messaging and marketing and everything else. You have that. I don't. What I have is a lot of expertise in how to get to good positioning. I know all the places where you're going to get stuck in a dead end. I know all the rat holes you're going to get down, and I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. And we're going to get to some. And I know what good positioning looks like when I see it. And so I'm going to help you get through that. But you would literally be nuts to try to hire someone outside of your company and say, you know what, here's all the brochures and stuff. We'll just throw that over the fence. You do it for us, April. That, guaranteed what I would come up with is crap. And so what I've got is the world experts on your stuff are right here in the room. That's you. And I'm going to guide you through a process that's going to get you to the best possible positioning for the stuff that you've got right now. You're the experts on that. I'm the experts on how do we get there.
Why did you write the book?
So the book was a couple of things. So the first one was when I was having a conversation with a founder or CEO about what we were going to do in the workshops that I run with companies. Mm-hmm. It was a long conversation because they'd be like, exactly how does it work? And you know how tech people, right? We're into the details. Mm. So they're like, exactly how is it going to work? And what are we going to do in the process? And so I would generally have more than one call to explain it. Like I'd explain it and then they'd go away and think about it for a bit. And then they come back with a whole bunch of questions. Well, what happens with this? And what about this? And how does that actually work? And, they'd ask all these questions. So I'd have to do a couple of calls. And so I got the idea that I would write a blog post, like a big mega blog post with exactly the methodology in it. And instead of having multiple meetings like that, I'd say, hey, read the blog post before we meet. And then we can, then we'll have a better conversation. This will go faster. Mm-hmm. So I started writing this blog post. So I wrote one blog post and it didn't do the job. It just wasn't enough detail. So that didn't work. So I started writing a more detailed one and it got longer and longer and longer. And then eventually I was like, oh shit, man, I think this is a book instead of a blog post. At the same time, I had a lot of CEOs or founders from small companies, like really early stage companies that didn't have significant revenue yet, come to me looking for advice, like not to hire me because they're not even paying themselves, let alone paying anybody else. So, but they're just coming to me looking for advice. And so I'm doing 3 or 4 coffee meetings a week with founders like that. And I kept thinking, man, I could, if I had this methodology written down, I could slide it across the table and say, this is how I do it. Like you guys can take a crack at it on your own and probably get 85-90% of the way there without me. So if I had, again, I thought if I had that in a book, one, it would make it easier to explain to CEOs that did want to hire me to help them what exactly I was going to do. And for the CEOs that didn't have the budget or just couldn't hire me, then it would be something I could give to them instead of having 9,000 coffee meetings trying to explain it an hour at a time. So that was where the idea of the book came. Like, it was never like, oh, I'm going to sell 1 million books and make a bunch of money off books. It was never that. It was more a tool for my own business and a little bit of a gift to the universe to people that couldn't afford or didn't want to work with me.
How important has the book been, do you think, in the development of your practice, right? And you developing your own position in the market as this expert?
Yeah, way more important than I thought it was going to be, to tell you the truth. Like, I mean, it's kind of impossible to know how my business would have done without the book. But I can say that since I've had the book, my business has changed a lot. So the first thing is that previous to having the book out, the majority of the business I got came through word of mouth between founders. So I would work, like, and you could see it even geographically. Like, I'd work with a founder in LA, and then I'd have, 19 calls from founders in LA because that guy is talking to his friends, and then they're calling me like, hey, you work with Joe, and we heard that went good. And so then I would do, so I do one company in Chicago, and then I'd spend the next 2 months talking to companies in Chicago, that sort of thing. So that's how my new business came. Since the book came out, I still get a bit of that word of mouth business, but I get a lot more business from people that have read the book and are like, we need this, we want this thing. And like, who is this lady? Let's call her. And so, so I get a lot more. And when I talk to them, they don't know anybody I've worked with previously. So I never had that before, and the book really facilitated that. The second thing is, I think and this is a bit harder to measure, and maybe I would have done this on my own anyway, but it gave me an excuse to really put my foot on the gas marketing my own business for a year. So because it was a pain in the ass to write the book. And so I thought, you know what, if I'm going to go through all this hassle to produce this book, I'm going to market the heck out of it for like a year, like not a week. Yeah. This is a year. And so I did, in 2019, I did 50 some, almost 60 speaking engagements. I was a guest on 60 podcasts.
Wow.
Did
you have to travel for all those?
Oh my God, yes. Like, I had weeks where I was doing 3 conference talks in a week in different cities, and I would just be
brutal.
Bop. Like, I was organizing stuff on my calendar by like, could I fly from here to there and whatever. Like, it was a nut job year where I was on a plane a lot for a year. And then I did a load of podcasts. I did a bunch of, like live Ask Me Anything things and contributing guest posts to places. And like, I was really out there in 2019. It was hard to avoid April 2019. And I think without the book, if I was just business as usual in my normal business, I don't think I'd have pushed it nearly that hard. Like, in a regular year, I was doing 5-6 speaking engagements. I might get asked to do a podcast here and there. But because I had the book, I was like, no, I'm going to, I'm out there looking for a speaking engagement. I'm out there looking to be on a podcast, which before I hadn't been doing that. So that actually might be the thing that made the difference in my business rather than the book. But yeah, I don't think I would have done it if the book wasn't out.
Well, I think they go together, because you said, if you just said, hey, I don't know what it is about books, but if you just said, hey, I want to talk to you about positioning. Okay. You're a marketing ex-VP who has some expertise here, but you put it down on paper and there's something that happens where people go, okay, I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah. I didn't think it actually, like, people told me that would happen. They said, oh, you're going to get speaking engagements because you have a book. And I actually didn't think that happened like that. I think I got speaking engagements because I was speaking. Like, I think the more you speak, the more people ask you to speak.
That makes sense.
As long as you're good, like, you got to be reasonably good. Stand up on stage and you suck, that they don't ask you to speak. But if you get up on stage and you're okay, and I'll tell you, one way to get okay at public speaking is do 60 of them in a year. You'll be an amazing public speaker at the end of that.
You'll be given the talk in your sleep. You won't even know you went up there.
Your timing will be really good. You won't be nervous. You'll conquer your stage fright. Yeah, all of that. So So not only was I doing a lot of speaking, I was getting to be a really good public speaker. Like I really matured, I think, as a speaker. I think it was okay at the beginning, and I got pretty good by the end of the year. So because I was getting better, then the word starts going around amongst the conference organizers, and they're like, "Oh, she's really good. You should get her because she was really good." And so the more I got speaking, the better I got at it, then the more speaking I got, and it kind of snowballed from there. And so the book was kind of an afterthought. Like nobody ever called me up and said, "Oh, your book's amazing. Come speak at our conference." Or, "Oh, I saw you wrote this book. Therefore, you're credible to speak on this." They all called me and said, "We heard you crushed it at so-and-so's conference last week. Why don't you come and speak at ours?" Okay. And I'd say, "Yeah, sure. Where is it? And can I fly there?" Oh my gosh. So yeah, so that's what that year was like. So yeah, I didn't think the book actually did anything for me there, but maybe it does now, because now the book sold quite a bit. And so I would say there's a lot of people know me because of the book now, that have never seen me speak at a conference or anything else. So
the market gravity, right? You build the gravity. And so what advice would you give to folks who, like, let's say they're coming out of executive role and they want to go out on their own and kind of create some unique positioning for themselves? How should they think about that?
Well, I think it's a good way to think about it, right? Is you're coming out and you want to go do a thing, and like, what's special about you? Like, why hire you instead of the 9 million other people that are thinking they should hang up their own shingle as a marketer as well? Mm-hmm. And so that's the first thing you got to think about. Like, why you versus anyone else? And you might decide freelancing is the way you want to go and you just want to be a freelancer. But then, I'd be thinking about, are there certain kind of companies that you're really good at, certain industries that you got a lot of experience at, certain kind of marketing thing you're really good at? And you say, look, like if you're a security startup, because there's billions of those, right? If you're a security startup that sells with a sales force or whatever, I'm your gal, because I've done 5 companies like that. And that's why you want to hire me versus all the other part-time VP marketing out there. Like, I think the more specialized you can get around it, the better you'll do. And then even beyond that, I think ideally what you want to get to is, I have an expertise in a thing, and there's an offering, and it's a project. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And, I think you want to look for the intersection of what are you uniquely good at that would make sense to have an outside person go do and pay an outside person to do. I had a friend of mine, and he was a repeat vice president product, and he decided he was sick of being an employee. He wanted to work for himself, sick of having a boss. And he came out and he's like, but I don't know, I can't just be a part-time vice president of product. That's just not even a job. So what he did was he pulled out, there's this framework that the product marketing people used to use back then. And it had this like 29 boxes on it. And it was it was like the pragmatic marketing framework, I've seen that thing. Yep. So this was like ages ago. I don't think people look at that thing anymore. But anyways, it's got 29 boxes on it. And he pulled out that sheet, and each box was representing a thing that a head of product should be worried about. Like, these are all the things that product managers need to do. So he looked at that box and he was like, which one of these boxes are a thing that you never actually do, but you wish you did, and you wish you could just outsource it? And so he picked a box that said win-loss analysis. So there was a box in there that said win-loss analysis. He's like, I have never done win-loss analysis. I always wanted to do win-loss analysis, but I didn't really know how to do it. And it was just a thing that we never got around to doing, but I wished I had it. And so he decided he was going to become the king of win-loss analysis. So he read everything there was to know about win-loss analysis. He went way down the win-loss analysis rat hole. He went back to a company that he had worked for previously and said, can I do your win-loss analysis? And they're like, hell yeah, we always wanted that done. So he did a bunch. Like, at the beginning, he was doing it for pretty low price. And then he ended up landing a big deal with Oracle, doing win-loss analysis for Oracle. Then the thing went nuts, and he ended up running this great big consulting business with more than a dozen full-time employees, just win-loss analysis. And in my opinion, if you want to go out on your own and build a good business, that's how you do it, like that.
So you think this is the more specialized, the better, if I'm hearing
in my opinion, yeah. The more specialized, the better. Your rates go up. The why should we hire you becomes more and more compelling.
I think people's fear is, there's 2 fears wrapped up in this. One is there's not enough work, and then I think the second fear is Exactly. So what you said about consulting being good, start, middle, end, is what they're worried about, right? Because as a part-time VP,
they're worried there's an end. Yeah,
but there's an end, right? And they don't want that end. They don't want, what if there's never another job?
I know. Like, so, and when I started, I thought that too. I was like, wouldn't it be great if just everybody just hired me on a retainer, and then I would never have to worry about getting new clients. I just, and then I realized that's called having a job. Yeah. That's what having a job is, right? Like yeah. And what exactly are you doing for that retainer day in, day out, improving it and whatever? And is that really what company wants? And is that what you want? And so, I had to get over my fear of where's the new business going to come. But what happens when you get really specialized is the business comes to you. It comes to you. I don't go out looking for any business. I mean, I do stuff like this, right? I'm talking on podcasts. I'm at the conferences, but I don't run ads. I don't do any traditional lead generation. I'm just the positioning lady. And if you're looking for the positioning lady, eventually you find me. And same with my friend who was the win-loss guy. Like, it got so ridiculous. Like, you could go anywhere. And I mean anywhere on the planet. So I remember I was speaking at a conference in Australia, and after the talk, there was a bunch of us went out for drinks. And so I'm sitting at a table with a bunch of software founders. And the one guy got talking about, we're losing these deals. And he says, I wish I could have somebody to come in and like do this analysis on these deals that we've lost, because I don't know what's going on. And I'm about to say, hey, I know a guy that does that. And the guy sitting beside him says, I know a guy that does win-loss analysis, and it was my friend. And I'm on the other side of the planet. Like, that's how that works. Like, wow. If you get really specialized, and he didn't do a bunch of marketing either. Every once in a while, he would pop up at a conference somewhere talking, and he wrote a guest post once in a while. But if you went looking for win-loss analysis expert, I mean, there was him. There was nobody else. So I think that's how you build a platform. That's how you get known for something. And, nobody says, give me a general vice president of marketing replacement, right? Nobody's Googling for that. Whereas, if you get known for doing a specialized thing, then the people find you, they come to you. That's how that works. And so, at the end, he was more busy than he could handle, and he's building a great big team to handle it. Me, I don't want to, it's not on my goal to build a great big team, but I'm booked up till September, I don't sit around worrying about where's the next one going to come. I'm more worried about, I got to do a qualifying call today, and I got to tell these people they can't book me for 6 months, and startups hate that.
Yeah. That's how right? Is when people are willing to wait 6 months to work with you,
bananas, right?
You're onto something. And I think just closing the loop on what you were just saying, I think what a lot of people miss too is that if you're charging reasonable fees, you don't need 100 clients a year or two, you know what I mean? That's right. You make a lot of money without all, right? And especially if what you've done is reduce labor intensity while increasing value, then you shouldn't have to go nuts facilitating that work either. It's getting to that point though, which is,
Yeah. Here's the other thing though, is the more specialized you get, you actually do get into this kind of virtuous cycle where you get really, really good at the one thing that you do.
Yeah.
Like, I've worked with 150 companies as a consultant doing repositioning. Like, I've literally seen it all. Wow. And so I'm super good. Like, I started out thinking I was pretty good at positioning because I'd done 16, right? And I'm not like times a billion now. Like, I actually think I'm amazing at this now, but it's because I only do this thing. And the same thing with my friend, who was the win-loss guy. Like, he only does win-loss analysis. Imagine how good you'd be at a thing if you spent 5 years only doing that thing.
Yeah, it's like the samurais or some shaping their swords out. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
The one thing how to do.
Exactly. And so, you get to that level of expertise, and people want to pay for that, particularly for something that they think is really important. Like, I don't want my local agency doing positioning, and I would pay 4 times for it. 4 times what I'd pay my local agency to do positioning, I pay 4 times for that if I could find someone that came to me and said, look, I only do tech companies, I only do B2B, I only do folks that are in between a couple million revenue to like 100 million revenue in there somewhere. and you have to have a sales team, and like people got like I tick down the boxes, and it's like it's a pretty small box by the time we get down to who I actually say yes to working with. But part of the reason why you're willing to wait a little while to get me and pay a little bit more to work with me is because I'm only dealing with people inside that box, so I'm amazing at it. And your local agency, well, they're doing one company's selling shoes and the other company's selling security software. Like these two things are completely different. Like they can't be an expert at it.
Their agencies generally too are selling time against deliverables. So it's what's the cheapest labor that we can deliver to check this box as fast as we can so we can do the next thing. And I think that's what people...
But again, like the best agencies are really specialized, right? The best
there you go.
They'll say, look, we don't do that because we don't specialize in that. Or we just do B2C and here's what we're going to do for you. Or, we just do design because we're awesome at design. But a lot of people will hire, like particularly in positioning, I see this where they're going to hire some generic consultant or generic agency that does 19 things. Like you look at their website and they've got 29 boxes. Here's our 29 things that we do. Like, do you think you do any one of those boxes really, really well? I doubt it. This is my rant on this is like, the better you get at a thing, the better you get at the thing. And then that's how your rates go up. That's how you get inbound leads coming to you because you get known for that thing. And that's how you stop having to worry about where does the next client come from. You're worried about disappointing the ones that do find you because you're like, you guys sound awesome and I love you, but we can't do it till September. Sorry.
September's pretty good. I mean, that's pretty good. Especially when you think about most tech companies, they hire a VP marketing and they're like, it's been 5 days. Why, where are our leads? Why aren't we seeing, 20% growth right now? So for them to be willing to wait, that says a lot.
Well, if it's more than a quarter, most startups aren't planning anything more than a quarter out. That piece of it, I feel like is a bit of a problem for me right now, which I'm working on maybe how to solve that. But these are what we refer to as champagne problems.
Good problem.
I am not complaining.
This has been wonderful. So for people who want to read the book, obviously awesome. They want to find and follow you. Where's the best places?
Yeah, well, I'm super busy right now. And so it's amazing how little participating in social media or anything else right now because I'm so busy with client work. But so the only social media I'm really active on is Twitter, and I'm at April Dunford. My website is aprildunford.com, and occasionally I'll plop out a pithy blog post over there. But if you want to learn more about what I do, you can go on there and look at it. And then I dabble on LinkedIn once in a while, but not really because I kind of hate it.
I don't play.
And hopefully you see me on a conference stage again soon because I actually really miss speaking at conferences.
God,
I don't think I'll go back to doing like 50 in a year, but I miss doing 4 or 5 in a year that are fun and up on stage, and you get to mingle with the other smart speakers and all that. Real people. I miss
soon. I think it's going to start summer, hopefully. Right? I don't know.
That would be great. I got invited to speak at a conference in Europe the first week of December, and I said yes. So we'll see if that happens. But I don't know. We got to be all vaccinated and stuff by then. But fingers crossed.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Yeah,
I think it is.
Yeah, I'm there with you. All right, wonderful. Thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. This was fun.
My pleasure.